By Tessa Dunlop, who's an historian, and Dickie Arbiter, who's the Queen's former press secretary. Good evening to you both. And the Queen, your former boss, is in Normandy this evening, or she's going to be entertained by President Hollande, and on what is probably her last state visit, do we think?
I don't think you should write her off.
I'm not writing her off.
No, but you're saying last
she's not getting younger.
Last state visit. Yeah, she's 88, and it might not be her last state visit. I sort of remember way back when the Queen Mother was 90, she went to Canada on a visit. So she was still up for travelling. It remains to be seen. If it's a short visit, like to France, Germany, Italy, or wherever, it could well continue. But yes, she's there. She's in Paris now for a state banquet before returning home tomorrow to go to the Epsom Derby.
No doubt she would never have missed this, like many of the veterans, because she herself is also that human link to the past, unlike the other heads of state who probably weren't even born or certainly can't remember it.
She wouldn't have missed it. We've got to remember that she was in the Women's Royal Auxiliary Service during the war, so she was in uniform, and she's there with her generation, as is Prince Philip, who was in the Royal Navy, was in the Mediterranean theatre as well as the Far East, mentioned in dispatches. So they are there with their generation, and there's been a lot of talk around, well, should we be commemorating such events? And yes, we should, because it's because of what happened in 1944 is the way we live today. Had it not happened, we wouldn't be living like this.
I suspect you might be preempting what Tessa may be about to say, but Tessa, put it into perspective for our generations and younger generations.
Well,
why should they or shouldn't they think it's important?
Well, it is very important on a number of different levels for the generation, for the Queen's generation. You know, this is remembering their era, their colleagues, their fellow soldiers who died, because war is predominantly about death. The problem about remembering war is we remember it through the survivors. But being blown to pieces on a beach, there's nothing romantic or glorious about that. It's horrible. So that needs to be remembered, and especially while we still have the human connection to that event. But beyond that, the D-Day landings, you know, they was huge, amphibious, unprecedented. They were the beginning of the end, this push to Berlin, which took another 11 months. So they were the end of a European war, which had followed off the back of another European war. And I think what's really important is, especially when all these world leaders are grouped together, you know, on Normandy right now, today, that it was the beginning of an unprecedented era of peace. You know, we are now looking at 70 years of peaceful Europe. And we spend so long nowadays smashing the European model, tusking each other, elbowing. You know, there's a bit of brinkmanship going on. Note that Putin's on the beach today with our Prime Minister. And I think it's important just to go, you know, we've also, the sons of these veterans, the grandsons of these veterans, we've done okay. We're holding the torch of peace, and we need to remember how grim war is and how important it is to keep going with our peaceful Europe and our peaceful, predominantly peaceful world. You
mentioned Putin. Some would say we skirted pretty close to the Third World War, certainly during the Cold War.
Yeah,
which is
I mean, it's a very precious vase, and when you drop it, oh boy.
But do you not think that's why it is important to commemorate what happened? Because it is an opportunity to get these people all together.
It's about remembering what happened in order to keep what is in the future together. You're talking about that vase. If we don't remember what happened, we're in danger of dropping that vase. And when that vase drops, it smashes to pieces.
Yes, but you know, parachute drops, red arrows flying overhead, it's good. It's also theatre. It's not war. And sometimes, because the Second World War, from the Allied point of view, the right war to fight, a bad enemy, a Nazi enemy. But sometimes there's a danger of, therefore, glorifying war. And that's my only reservation.
Yeah, but you're taking that particular event out of context. That was yesterday. The start of D-Day was a parachute landing at Pegasus Bridge. They had to take that bridge to stop any advance by the Germans before they could land on the beaches of Normandy. So that marked that particular event. And it was right to have a parachute drop, because that's how the guys dropped in.
Please.
No, I agree. And there is a place for theatre and ceremony and remembering. But it's also very difficult and we don't want to really be told what war's about, because it's about premature death, blowing up the sons of mothers and fathers.
But by the same token, we can't deny it happens, and it still happens, and people still unfortunately die.
But I think the problem is it's all sanitised on television and these ceremonies, and they are very moving.
The stories we've been hearing on 5 News haven't been sanitised in the slightest. We had a veteran sitting where you were last night. You remembered the American mate he just made who got shot soon after. The sacrifice that he made, and still remembers it viscerally 70 years later.
What is terribly sad is that we seem, or there is a part of the community that seems to be blanking it out and arguing against commemorating these events. And if you go to Normandy and talk to the people who live in Normandy, the generations have passed down what had happened, and they welcome these veterans into their homes and with open arms.
Well, let me just put this to you, Tessa, because it is the 70th anniversary. When the 80th comes around, many of these people obviously won't be here anymore, and perhaps that is why this is being made such a big deal of.
Again, and I don't have in any way an objection about the ceremony and about making a big deal of it. I just think we also need to remember it in the broader context, which is this was the beginning of peace. Well, 11 months. You know, we were seeing the end. The end was in sight. I'm working closely with 15 amazing female veterans because there was a big female presence, especially on the home front. And you know, they talk about, a lot of them are working at Bletchley Park. They talk about knowing, sensing this was it. This was the push.
But you've got to remember that it was a significant beginning of the end, because if it hadn't happened, we might not be speaking English today.
And we're glad you both are. Otherwise, we would struggle to understand you.
And he was born in the war. It was a 1940 baby.
He was, and still
4 years old. You would have been.
Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you both.